Hi, it's Laura from Sweet Handmade Cookies. Welcome back to the Sweet Handmade Cookies kitchen. Today I'm working on a set of birthday cookies for someone who loves Mamma Mia. I'm creating these cookies for a friend of mine's daughter who's turning 14, and they are Mamma Mia inspired. I am flooding all of these cookies in white to begin with, and I flood my cookies and decorate my cookies in delicious royal icing. And so what I'm doing is I'm going to flood each one of these cookies with the white, and then I'm going to let the cookies dry for a minimum of 5 hours, but preferably overnight. So if I've timed it right, I've baked the cookies and flooded them before the end of the day and then let them sit overnight. So the first design that I'm working on is this tile cookie. And I colored the icing blue. This is the same blue that I'm going to use throughout the set. And then I placed it in a piping bag and cut the tiniest little hole. And now using my overhead projector, I am projecting this image onto the cookie, and I'm sort of using that as a way to trace the design. So there's a couple of different ways I could have gotten this tile onto the cookie. I could have used a stencil. So if I had a stencil that had this exact design, I would have placed it over top of the dry flooded cookie, and then I would have scraped the blue icing over that stencil, filling in the exposed sections. But I didn't have a stencil, so that wasn't an option for me. The next option could have been for me to use my printer, my edible ink printer. I could have printed the design on the cookie. And I do love using my printer, but if that was the only thing I was adding to this cookie, it would have made the cookie rather flat. And I do like the look of the raised sections of the icing, so I didn't want to go for that flat look of the printed cookie. I could have painted the cookie as well, but I knew that would also be very time consuming, and I decided to go for the piping technique. I do like how this turned out. It was very time consuming, and so in reality I needed to make 2 cookies in this set with this tile design. If I had had to make many cookies, I would have chosen one of the other options. I would have either ordered a stencil or I would have printed it, because these cookies took 13 minutes each. So I'm just going on and finishing up the design on these cookies. Like I said, I only needed to make 2, and they turned out really great. Enjoy the process. And just the finishing touches on this last heart. And this cookie is done. And now moving on to the bell bottoms. So if you've seen the movie or the play, you know there are some great songs and dance routines, and one of the most memorable ones is of the 3 ladies dancing in their bell-bottom pants. And so I thought a pair of bell bottoms would be a perfect addition to this set. And so for this top section, I'm using a flood consistency icing, the same icing that I used on the tile. And then for the bottom section where I make the bell bottoms, I'm using a thicker icing. And because I want the design I'm piping now to stay and not flood together, I'm using this thicker icing. And you'll see that it looks sort of like fringe, and it sort of keeps its fringe design even after it sits for a while. Last row of fringe, and this cookie is complete. And so for this cookie, I wanted to show off some Greek architecture. And the way I'm doing that is I'm adding some blue shutters to a white background, which would mimic some of the beautiful architecture you see in Greece. And I'm also going to add a pot with big sprigs of Bougainvillea flowers in pink. And so I'm using my blue flood consistency icing to put on these shutters, And then once they have crusted over, I'll come back and add some more details to the shutters. Let's add the birthday girl's name in the Mamma Mia font. And so I'm using 2 consistencies of icing here to get them super precise. And using for these thin sections here, I'm using that thick icing I used on the bottom of the bell-bottom pants. And for these thicker sections here, I'm using the flood consistency icing that I've used on other parts of these cookies. And so I'm going 1 letter at a time. Of course, I'm projecting that onto the cookie using my overhead projector, and then I just follow that outline. I double checked with Mom to make sure I got the spelling of the name correct. I do know sometimes Mariana is spelled with 2 N's, but this beautiful Mariana just has 1 N in her name. And what I usually do when I have to put names on cookies is I copy and paste the information into Word, whereas that is usually where I adjust the font, but I don't retype the letters. That's just a really easy way to increase the possibility of mistakes. So I do usually cut and paste from the original list I have received from the customer. And I showed this set to a friend of mine after I finished, and she immediately noticed this was the font of Mamma Mia, the one that you see on the movie posters and on the play marquees. So that turned out really cute. Along with bell-bottom pants, I also wanted to create platform boots, and I'm doing that here by piping in little sections of the boots, and I can do that to create dimension. And so I pipe in little sections that don't touch one another, wait about 5 minutes for the icing to crust over, and then I can add the other sections that do touch. And because the icing has crusted over, you keep that differentiation between the sections. And that really makes the cookies look great. Another way to achieve that design look to show the differentiation between the boots and the heels and the platform sections of the boots is I could use markers or lines of icing, but I don't think it looks quite as great as it does when I just use this simple technique of time. I've used an edible ink marker to draw on the branches of the Bougainvillea, and now I'm just adding a pot for it to grow in. So it's a birthday set. I wanted to have the word birthday somewhere on the cookies. So I took the ABBA classic Dancing Queen and switched it up to Birthday Queen. And I thought that that was really appropriate here. And I'm using a flood consistency icing to pipe these cookies. I think it's actually just a tiny bit thicker than flood so that the letters don't flow together. And I'm actually piping this, the way I'm seeing the letters as I'm piping this is I'm seeing the letters from the side. And I found that to be quite a challenge. When I was piping that H, I didn't even really know what letter I was on. My brain just couldn't make that compute. In the end, I think it turned out pretty good. The other thing is using an overhead projector is sometimes you make a shadow where you actually need to see where you're piping. And so if you do a number of these cookies, say I had to do 10 of these, by the time you get to number 10, it's almost muscle memory to get that design onto the cookie. This was actually my first time piping it, and it was a bit of a struggle. I'm glad it turned out really great. All right, let's get the branches onto the cookies so we can add some bougainvillea and color to these cookies. And so it's time to start adding the flowers, and I'm going to use this beautiful pink. And each one of these dots is to represent one blossom of the bougainvillea flower, and I want a whole pile of them. I want it to be overflowing with flowers. Of course, if I was to put dots and dots and dots on top of one another, all those dots would blend together and it would just become a big mass. And I want all these dots to stay individualized. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cycle through the cookies. I'm going to hit this one up. I'm going to put on the dots. Then I'm going to move on to the next cookie, put on dots that are spaced apart. They're not touching. And then I'm going to just keep coming back. By the time I get back to the first cookie, those dots will have set enough that if another dot touches them, it will stay a dot and will not blend together and flow together. And that's the secret to creating piles and piles of flowers. And so I have 2 other cookies in the set that are going to have these bougainvillea flowers, and that is these Birthday Queen cookies and these cookies with the shutters and the pot of branches. So let me add the dots to here, and then I'm going to move on to a slightly different cookie and take a break from the blossoms. And so while the blossoms are just setting up a little bit so I can add the next pass of dots, I'm going to work on these platform boots. Can't just have plain platform boots. I mean, they have to be exciting. And so I'm adding these flowers. So here is pass 2 of adding the Bougainvillea flowers. And I'm just going to show you this little cookie again and again. This is pass 3. Again, let it dry for a few minutes, and finally pass 4. And on pass 4, I can make the shape of the flower clusters a little bit bigger. And then I've decided to go in and add tiny little dots of green for some realism. And here are the finished cookies for Mariana, the birthday queen, turning 14. I hope she loved them. And so now it is time to package the cookies. As you know, I package my cookies in glassine bags. Glassine is a smooth and glossy paper that is air, water, and grease resistant. And best part is they are compostable or recyclable. And so after I've put the cookies into the bags, I fold the tops over and close them up with a branded sticker. Packaging each cookie individually helps keep the cookies safe during transport and helps keep them fresh a little bit longer. And so after this, I'm going to place the cookies into a brown paper bag, and they will be ready to go. If you stuck around for this whole video, thank you very much for putting up once again with my craggly throat. I had a bout of laryngitis and it took me quite a while to get over it, but I'm getting there a little bit closer every day. So once again, this is the final set. Thank you so much for sticking around and watching my video and learning about my design process. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and think about subscribing. See you next week.